On last week's program, we had set the stage with just a bit of the information about Comet Elenin, and I'd like to refresh some of this information and bring a few new facts and statistics to the table that I think many of you may not yet be aware of. First, Comet Elenin. For those of you who know little or nothing about it, Elenin is a most mysterious object. Is it actually a comet in the first place? Well, if you have not yet heard of the electric universe model of our cosmos, please make note of that and go and do a bit of homework. There's a website, the Thunderbolts of the Gods, that will make a bit of an exposition on this subject as well. There are those, in other words, who are finding the truth about the right functioning of our universe, of our cosmos, of our solar system, instead of this bunk that has been allowed to remain in our textbooks, both high school as well as university-level textbooks. This bunk that NASA and that the secret space program have been aware of the truth and the right functioning of these things for quite some length of time, for decades. And yet they have allowed these false paradigms to remain what we are taught in our textbooks because it is more convenient for them, and why else? You guessed it. For them to reveal and disclose the truth and make it public knowledge, they deem that to be a compromise of national security. They feel like by maintaining the truth about these paradigms and the right functioning of our universe, that represents a bit of a competitive advantage that they might have over nation states, those both hostile and non-hostile as well. Comet Elenin, ladies and gentlemen, is mysterious. Mysterious because we have almost no photographic evidence of it. Mysterious because it was discovered by a Russian astronomer, Leonid Elenin, on December 10th of 2010, and yet no one has access to this astronomer. No one is able to interview him. Nobody even knows for sure, completely, if he actually exists. And yet there are other sources out of the Soviet Union that have made declarations that this quote-unquote comet Elenin appears to be demonstrating behavior to suggest that it is under guided control. That it is under guided control. Your host will leave that to sit for the moment as we continue to talk about Elenin. Another element about how it is unique is that it is traveling very much along the plane, the orbital plane of the planets in our solar system. Now, what does that mean? If you picture a tabletop, and at the center a large basketball that represents our sun, and each of the planets range in size from being marbles to baseball to softball or whatever the particular size is for each planet, most of them orbit around the sun along that flat plane as though they're rolling in orbital patterns on the surface of that tabletop that you've imagined. Most comets that come through our solar system make their way in a perpendicular fashion to that tabletop, as though you were dropping something from on top and it would hit the table but yet pass through the plane of our solar system if it could pass through that tabletop. That's kind of the fashion that most of these objects pass. It's uncommon for comets to travel right along the same plane that most of our planets are traveling upon. And when that occurs, it's not just that it's unusual and interesting. Because it's traveling right along that same plane, it can cause the most interference, the most engagement with those planets, either in a gravitational sense or, folks, more importantly, in an electrical sense. Because one of the things that has been kept from you, the truth that has been known by some parties, and they've known it based upon their research that was funded with our taxpayer dollars, one of those important truths, and the reason that I point out this notion of the electric universe model of our cosmos, is because there is a tremendous importance upon actual electrical relationships, not just between planets, but between the planets and the sun, as well as between these other objects which pass through the solar system, that we have misnomers about these objects. We think, for example, as comets as being muddy snowballs, that they're largely ice and compressed gases and or liquids frozen into a snowball and covered with matter, so that it's like a muddy snowball flying through space, and eventually and gradually there are erosions made in the snowball, and that's what creates the tail of this thing. Please pursue some research on this notion of the electric universe model of the cosmos so that you can more accurately understand the truth of what these objects are and that is to say that they are not muddy snowballs whatsoever, that these objects are actually asteroids, but the distinction between them and what we currently think of as asteroids is that these objects are charged bodies, whereas typical or quote-unquote common asteroids do not hold a charge. I don't want to dwell too deeply into that path because I want to continue our exposition of Elenin. Why is it important, folks? Well, first, it has demonstrated an intense orbital eccentricity. That means that it's not behaving nicely. It's not driving on a nice, straight, and narrow path as it makes its way through our solar system. Instead, it's twisting and turning. It's doing a lot of swerving. Is it guilty of driving while intoxicated? Well, we're not sure, but it is swerving rather recklessly, and in doing so, this orbital eccentricity makes it very difficult for us to accurately project what its trajectory will be as it continues along its path through our solar system. Now, I know that many of you are astute researchers. You like to see, touch, and feel some of this evidence yourself. It's why I will point you to www.nasa.gov, that's G-O-V, and from there, or even from your Google or Yahoo search engine, you can search for the JPL. That stands for NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory. You can do a search for the NASA JPL Small Body Database Browser. When you get to JPL's small body access, or their resources, their archives, part of what they have available are these orbit diagrams in which you're given a model, so to speak, of our solar system, of the orbital paths of each of the planets, and not just Comet Elenin, but any of these other objects that your host is about to speak upon. You're able to enter these into this tool provided by JPL, and you're able to make some manipulations of how you're viewing the model and seeing the trajectory path, as well as play this forward and backward like a DVD so that you can see the orbital path of these objects moving forward and backward for yourself. It's a very handy tool. If you have any interest whatsoever on these subjects, some of you have probably already seen this tool being utilized and uploaded to YouTube in various videos. I encourage you to go there yourself, folks. In particular, as I get into some of these details, not just of Elenin's orbital path, but some of its friends that it's bringing through the universe, through our solar system, and in particular some of the dates that I am about to mention, because I'm about to give you, I hope your pen and paper are handy, some very specific dates of some windows of events that are coming up on us very, very quickly that I think it's important for each one of you to be more informed about. Continuing with Elenin, it's going to make its closest approach to our sun on the 10th of September, 2011. And by its closest approach, what we're talking about is it will make that turn around the sun, and in part due to the slingshot effect, the sun's gravity is going to launch that as it makes its continued trajectory, then leaving and moving away from the sun. It is believed by some that Elenin's orbital eccentricity, perhaps combined with what it does when it makes that turn around the sun, might make a further change or a further alteration to its projected trajectory. Now, why is that important? Well, it's important, folks, because on the 16th of October, Elenin is going to make its closest path to the Earth at only 0.23 astronomical units away from us. First question is, what is an astronomical unit? It is the name that's given to the distance between the Earth and the Sun. That distance is called 1 astronomical unit. So it will come within one-fourth of the distance between the Earth and the Sun on that date on October 16th. But folks, I know that you're telling yourself, well, that's quite a distance away. You're right, that's more than 21 million miles, but that is based upon their current projections of its trajectory. And once again, Elenin is not behaving nicely as it's making its path along the interstate highway of our solar system. It's swerving around erratically. We call it orbital eccentricity. Also, because Elenin has not been through here since what is projected to be 11,000 years ago, NASA has no way of knowing what Elenin's going to do when it makes its turn around the sun and begins coming our way, not to mention the fact of what it is caused and what occurs as it makes its way through Mercury's orbital pattern, as well as it makes its way across Venus's orbital pattern and makes its way toward the Earth. So it might very well come quite a degree closer than 0.23 AU. Only time will tell. And now, even if that is not the case, there's still more to this about why it's important.